me, somebody.
When we unashamedly live for God, the world's going to think that we're crazy. Out of extreme joy for God, David danced before the Lord. His wife saw him dancing and she thought that he looked like a fool. He wasn't wearing his royal robes, and he danced with all of his might. Something tells me David wasn't a professional dancer, so he probably looked a little silly. But David's response is that he wasn't dancing for people. He was dancing before the Lord. And if his dancing meant that he looked undignified to others, then he was willing to look even more undignified than this if it meant that he was worshiping the Lord. Part of being a Christian is finding our worth not in what others think about us, but in what God thinks about us. And because Christ has forgiven us of our sin, God sees us as his precious children. And since we have this relationship with God, we ought to have such joy in us that causes us to do things that the world thinks are completely foolish. We ought to give ourselves to God's service. We ought to love people in extraordinary ways. And sometimes we may even be moved to dance before the Lord in worship with all of our might. Don't worry about what others think about you. Find your worth in God and worship him with all of your might.